Hello and welcome to Help Me Believe, the show about Christian apologetics and theology. My name is Haden Clark, your host, and today we will be looking at Paul's statement about Jesus being born of a woman in Galatians 4:4 as we continue asking the question, did Paul believe in a historical Jesus in contrast with Jesus Mythicism? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, leave us a review, and if you want to support the mission of spreading and defending the truth of Christianity, just follow the Patreon link below and become a supporter for as little as $1 a month. My name is Haden Clark, and this is Help Me Believe. In Galatians 4:4, Paul writes, "But when the fullness of time came, God sent out his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, in order that he might redeem those under the law, in order that we might receive the adoption." Now here we have an unequivocal statement from Paul that Jesus was, quote, born of a woman. This would obviously mean that Paul believed Jesus was a biological human being that lived on earth. The word born is translated from the Greek root word ginomai, which simply means to be or to become. When used in conjunction with woman, it clearly denotes human birth. To become of a woman is just what it means to be born. The point here in Galatians 4 is that Jesus came to save human beings that were enslaved under the elemental forces and under the law. He did so by becoming one of them. He became a human being born under the law. In fact, the law only applies to humans, so there's no way that Jesus could not be a human being on earth and somehow be, quote, under the law. So here we have Paul saying that Jesus was, quote, born of a woman under the law, which obviously means that Jesus was a Jewish human being on earth that had a mother. Now, why on earth would I take strides like this just to explain what is perfectly obvious? Because some mythicists have tried to say that this verse does not support the claim that Paul believed in a historical Jesus, even though it obviously does. They will say things like the word born only means manufacture. While ginomai can certainly mean something like manufacture, the root word is actually even more general than that. It only means to become. The context is what determines how we should specifically translate the word. For example, let's work with manufacture for a moment. What does it mean to be manufactured of a woman? It clearly is talking about human birth. I was manufactured of a woman on October 9th, 1992. Saying it this way is just awkward, and it makes much more sense to translate the word as born. Another way that mythicists have tried to escape the obvious is to say that this passage is an allegory. They turn to Galatians 4:24, where Paul says, "which these things are spoken allegorically," and then they wash their hands of the matter. But not so fast. When Paul says these things, what things is he referring to? Well, when you read the entire passage and don't just try to cherry pick the data in an attempt to defend a predetermined outcome, you see that the things which Paul is speaking of allegorically are Abraham's sons and wives in verses 22 and 23, not Jesus, which is all the way back in verse 4. Paul's allegory doesn't begin until verse 21. The point Paul is making in his allegory is that anyone, whether a Jew or Gentile, can be considered a child of Abraham through faith in Christ. The point about Jesus back in verse 4 was that Jesus came born of a woman under the law in order to make this adoption possible. Jesus' being born of a woman is not an allegorical statement, but a defense of why it was possible for Jesus to redeem those under the law. Jesus could redeem those under the law because he entered time and space born of a woman under the law. He became exactly like those who were under the law so that he could rescue them. Dr. Richard Carrier wants to say that Jesus' being born of a woman is an allegory for being born under the Old Covenant, just as the later allegory of being born to Hagar is akin to being born under the Old Covenant. He says in his book on the historicity of Jesus on page 660 of the Kindle version at least, so the woman here is simply the Old Covenant, not an actual person. In fact, Carrier cannot fathom why Paul would be referencing a literal woman. What purpose would it possibly serve for his argument? The problem with Carrier's contrived explanation is threefold. First, the allegory does not begin until verse 21, as I previously stated. When Paul says that these things are spoken of allegorically, the these things is in reference to the women he has just mentioned. The allegory is not in reference to the woman in verse 4. That's simply false. Carrier tries to say that because Paul is making one single argument in chapter 4, that it follows that the entire argument is an allegory. He does that on the same page in his book on the historicity of Jesus, at least in the Kindle version. It does not follow from the fact that part of Paul's single argument is an allegory that the whole argument is an allegory. That's a logical fallacy known as the fallacy of composition. Secondly, the point Paul is making is that Jesus became like the ones that he redeemed. Those whom he redeemed were born under the law of a woman. That is, they were Jews. In Romans, Paul will highlight the importance of Jesus taking on flesh in order to put sinful flesh to death. Here, Paul is claiming that Jesus died to the law in order to redeem those under the law. In order to do so, he became like those under the law, a human being just like them, born of a woman. Third, even if Carrier is right and being born of a woman is akin to being born of the Old Covenant, everyone in the Old Covenant that was born also had a human mother. In order to be under the Old Covenant, you had to be a human Jew on earth. Carrier himself says Jesus was born momentarily to the allegorical Hagar, the slave woman, which is the Torah law, the Old Testament, which holds sway in the earthly Jerusalem. Emphasis mine, Carrier on the historicity of Jesus, page 660 on the Kindle version. Here's the point. The Torah law only held sway over Jewish human beings on earth. It did not hold sway over celestial beings in outer space. Hence, Carrier implicitly defeats himself. In summary, to every sober-minded individual in New Testament scholarship, Galatians 4:4 is one of the many instances where Paul implies that he believed in a historical Jesus. In fact, Paul could not be more clear. Paul, writing only 10 to 20 years after Jesus' crucifixion, is an excellent source of information for historical Jesus studies. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, leave us a review, and if you want to support the mission of spreading and defending the truth of Christianity, just follow the Patreon link below and become a supporter for as little as $1 a month. My name is Haden Clark, and this is Help Me Believe.